I'm not gonna lie, guys. When I saw Astyanax had returned to us, I wasn't exactly enthused about farming for a bow that I already thought was perfect. You see, one of my most used bows inside of Destiny, despite me not even being a bow guy, is the adept version of Astyanax. I absolutely love this bow, and I had everything on it. A fast draw time, hitting that threshold of 576, incandescent, archer's tempo, with that wild card origin trait. Fellas, it don't get much better than that. And that Astyanax has carried me through many content inside of Destiny. So when this new version showed up, sure, it looked shiny, it had different tiers, but to be quite honest with you, I wasn't sold on it until we actually landed some amazing rolls. Despite us not having anything in our artifact mods for bows, Astyanax is an absolute monster. It has a host of combinations that take you to solar heaven. It still has the ability to drop that draw time down to 576. And arguably the biggest selling point to this bow is the fact that it has access to temporal mods, most notably Temporal Blast. I know by this point you're probably getting sick of me talking about this mod, but it is so good and it's phenomenal on Astyanax. Keep in mind, this mod is so good, it has turned Opaque Hourglass, which is the new crossbow we got with the raid, into the best DPS weapon in the game. Bows have very interesting interactions when it comes to Temporal Blast. Guys, we're gonna be breaking that all down today for our bow here, Astyanax. Now, for those that are trying to get this weapon, it drops from Pinnacle Ops. It can be either a focus drop or, of course, just a random drop. Breaking down its perks, though, in our third column, we have Firefly, Successful Warm-Up, Impulse Amplifier, Rapid Hit, Incandescent, and Transcendent Moments. In our fourth column, we have Burning Ambition, Explosive Head, Binary Orbits, Elemental Honing, Swashbuckler, and High Ground. Now, normally, I would just go through and give you the readout of all the different perk combinations that would make sense. And yes, we see some of those jumping out to us even right now. You've got great combinations like Successful Warm-Up and Explosive Head, which has always been a great combination. You have solar setups like Incandescent and Burning Ambition. You've got Firefly and Burning Ambition, which doesn't really synergize considering that the solar damage from Firefly doesn't cause Scorch. But then you have damage perks like Elemental Honing, which is one of the easier damage perks to keep in rotation, especially if you're rocking a prismatic build. Instead, what you should be asking yourself when it comes to any seasonal weapon, which one of these combinations is best at proccing Temporal Blast? Temporal Blast, out of all the temporal mods, is the best mod. It does a tremendous amount of damage for free, simply for doing damage with your weapon. You see, the weapon stores an improved portion of its damage dealt into charges. And at 5 charges, the weapon's next shot creates an explosive blast on impact that damages nearby combatants. Now, just to give you an idea of just how strong this is, you can see me taking on these tanks inside of this Grandmaster Nightfall. And yes, this is damage from a bow, but it's not just the bow. It's the Temporal Blast that's making those health bars disappear. I know you have access to things like temporal armaments, which some of you would opt for as it does more damage against Cabal and Vex targets, that being an extra 15%. But despite that buff, Temporal Blast still outperforms temporal armaments, especially with the right combination. So with those things in mind, what is the best combination to proc Temporal Blast stacks? Well, turns out, guys, Temporal Blast, as we've spoken about before, scales based on damage, meaning at level content, you can pretty much proc Temporal Blast stacks as much as you want. It also scales on AoE damage. For instance, if you get a kill with Firefly or even Incandescent, that AoE damage will actually spread out, hit multiple targets, and that will add on stacks of Temporal Blast. Now, something else that's also nice when we were reviewing Year-Tide Apex is that perks like Burning Ambition that applies Scorch and eventually an Ignition also contributes to those stacks of Temporal Blast. You can see here in some of this gameplay with Astyanax, the stacks roll over because of that extra Scorch damage. So essentially, Temporal Blast is dependent on damage. At base, a Temporal Blast proc from Astyanax takes 4 shots, with the 5th being the Temporal Blast. If you were to land base body shots here, it would be 5 shots before Temporal Blast is ready. Now notice when we start increasing the damage of our weapon, Radiance plus 200 weapons, this is able to proc Temporal Blast in just 3 shots, with the 4th one dealing the blast damage. And with mods like Fever and Chill, it's so easy to get Radiant. We also have Radiant Shrapnel. There's a number of things that contribute to increasing our damage further, just directly through our artifact mods, and with this weapon being a solar weapon, which, by the way, Radiant pierces barrier shields. But then we asked ourselves, do we have an exotic that can boost our damage, specifically for bows? That we do, guys. You see, Oathkeeper is made for bows. Adamantine Brace. Bow charges can be held indefinitely. You gain a bonus to the bow's damage when duration release based on how long the charge was held. Provides a moderate benefit to the airborne effectiveness stat of the bow. Essentially, guys, when you pull the bow, you'll see there at the bottom left, your meter will start to fill. Now, Bungie actually buffed Oathkeepers at the beginning of Edge of Fate, allowing it to increase its top-end damage bonus to 200% from 150%. They also said they bent the curve on the damage bonus to give more of the total damage bonus earlier in the overdraw. Now, unfortunately, Oathkeepers does not work with the crossbow, something I hope they change, but for pre-Astyanax, it definitely works.
The beautiful thing about Oathkeeper is that once we begin to stack damage buffs, which we're going to dive into in just a bit later, it's possible to reach max stacks of Temporal Blast in a single shot.
Oathkeepers also gives us a small bump there in draw time as well. So it's not just the damage, and you also don't even have to go for the full draw every single time. The point is that Oathkeepers is increasing our damage enough here to allow us to bypass multiple hits with our bow to get stacks accumulated to get that Temporal Blast proc. Again, like I said at the beginning of this review, the whole reason why we're even considering this version of pre-Astyanax over its previous version, outside of tiers and all that other stuff, is the fact that it has access to Temporal Blast. And the beautiful thing is that Oathkeepers is giving us that extra damage. It's allowing us to bypass multiple shots to get either all stacks required for Temporal Blast or at least close enough to it. Now, this is where the review here is going to take a turn because we have to talk Oathkeepers. The question is, what is the most optimal way to use this exotic post-change? You see, Bungie said they bent the curve on the damage bonus to give more of the total damage bonus earlier in the overdraw. Now, that in combination with the 200% buff means that yes, overall, Oathkeepers is giving us more damage. The question is, though, where is the breakpoint? Where is the point on this bar that you need to charge up to? Not just for the sake of Temporal Blast, but for just the sake of your bow.
When testing Oathkeepers, at base we start at 258 damage at 200 weapon stats. Now at 1/4, this does 434 damage, which is a 68% increase. Now at the halfway mark, this goes up to 131%, and then at 3/4 and beyond is where things get interesting. You see, at 3/4, we hit 174%, but at full, all the way charged up, it still remains at 174%. Keep in mind, based on the patch notes, this is supposed to be a 200% buff at the top end. Honestly, I don't really know what's going on here, guys, because based on the patch notes, it's not just the 200%, but the fact that Bungie mentioned that they bent the curve on the damage bonus makes sense, essentially giving you the most damage for your time at 174%. And you can see the big jumps there where it would be linear. It's just that it doesn't reach that max cap of 200%. This is most likely a bug. Considering how many things were just not included in the patch notes, I wouldn't be surprised if this was overlooked. So at least for the time being, don't waste your time filling up Oathkeeper's bar to maximum capacity. I wish we could get that 200% buff, especially when taking this bow into higher power deltas, which scales down our damage and increases the proc time of Temporal Blast. However, with all the other damage buffs that we can stack, even if you're not hitting full stacks of Temporal Blast in one shot, you still should be able to get it relatively quickly with the right damage perks. Now this takes us to a couple perks I wanted to look at directly. First, let's talk Explosive Head. Explosive Head has always been a really good perk on bows especially. It increases the damage by 15% in terms of body shot damage, and by crits, 10%. Keep in mind though, it splits our damage here, meaning you got the impact damage of our bow, and then you have the explosive version. The problem with Oathkeepers is that it only increases the damage of our impact damage. It's the reason why Leviathan's Breath isn't running around absolutely one-tapping everything, and that's simply because its explosive damage is not increased by Oathkeepers. Obviously a balanced decision here, but the point is that still remains for Explosive Head. Now I still think Explosive Head is a good perk. Matter of fact, when testing at base, it takes 4 shots to proc Temporal Blast, whereas Explosive Head here takes 3 shots. But when we look at Elemental Honing, this is where Elemental Honing and Oathkeepers work so beautifully together. Oathkeepers plus Elemental Honing times 3 allows you to charge a full Temporal Blast in just a single shot. Yes, you do have to get to that 3/4 pull, but you do that along with Elemental Honing times 3, and boom, there you go. Temporal Blast is ready to go. And keep in mind, the other good thing about Elemental Honing is number 1, its duration is just so long. We're talking 20 seconds with this buff, and all you have to do is deal damage from different elemental types, which is really not difficult to do. And keep in mind, we're just talking elemental honing times 3. You could stack this all the way up to elemental honing times 5, although a little more difficult in that area, but it is possible, with each one of these stacks giving you more damage. Now, where elemental honing is really nice here is not only its stacking capabilities with Oathkeepers to give us that Temporal Blast shot, but elemental honing itself scales our Temporal Blast damage. Notice at base we're doing 666 damage Temporal Blast at 200 weapon stats. But notice elemental honing is scaling our temporal damage all the way up, almost to 900. Fellas, that is a massive increase. Now here is the unfortunate part about Oathkeepers. Oathkeepers itself, despite it increasing our bow damage and allowing us to get the stacks of temporal faster, does not increase the Temporal Blast damage itself, which is super unfortunate. I would love to see Temporal Blast damage at 174% more, which is what really is spawning the debate here. Should you use Oathkeepers, or should you use something like Foe Tracer, or perhaps any other exotic that can increase the damage of our bow and also increase the damage of our Temporal Blasts? Looking at temporal damage here with Foe Tracer, it does scale it to 811. So yes, other exotics do in fact scale the damage of Temporal Blasts. But keep in mind, Oathkeepers is assisting in getting to that Temporal Blast proc faster. Honestly, I would love if Bungie came out and addressed Oathkeepers for a number of reasons. Number one, where's our 200% buff? Number two, would Oathkeepers ever scale our Temporal Blast damage, or is this intentionally designed? And maybe it is intentionally designed, considering Oathkeepers only affects our impact damage. What I really want you to know from this, though, is that yes, Oathkeepers is good, but Pre-Astyanax can be used with a number of different exotic armor pieces, making it a bow not only just for hunter mains, but for anyone that wants to build into it. Now, the next question I wanted to look at was Burning Ambition. And this was arguably the biggest letdown of everything. Burning Ambition, for some reason on this bow, takes so long to get to an ignition. And maybe it's the time duration, but the point is, a year-tied Apex with Burning Ambition takes 6.7 seconds to reach an ignition. Pre-Astyanax, 11.2, literally requiring 9 shots. I wanted to come in here and tell you guys that yes, Burning Ambition is the way to go. Fellas, all day long, go solar synergy heaven with Incandescent and Burning Ambition. But the reality is, it just doesn't work for Temporal Blast procs. And then on top of that, Burning Ambition just by itself on this bow takes way too long to get to that ignition. And then on top of it taking too long, 9 times out of 10, whatever you're hitting will most likely be dead before you even get to that ignition. And keep in mind, this is with Ember of Ashes. When you've got other weapons that are taking half the amount of time to reach that ignition, then immediately I roll out Burning Ambition as an S tier option on this bow. Instead, guys, if I had to really sit down and tell you what the god roll for Pre-Astyanax is, it would be Elastic String alongside Compact Arrow Shaft to increase our reload with Incandescent and elemental honing all day long. And keep in mind, Incandescent, when you defeat targets and you spread Scorch, sure, you're not necessarily gonna reach that ignition, but that Scorch is going to allow you to reach Temporal Blast stacks even faster. And then you have elemental honing, which is increasing our damage. But then you have Wildcard, which is the origin trait on this weapon, which by the way, the enhanced version of this is supposed to bring that cooldown of submunitions even lower. But these submunitions that drop, those two contribute to Temporal Blast stacks. Again, it's still damage. And even more so than that is that if something steps on a submunition and dies, guess what? That can proc Incandescent. All of these things are going to contribute to you getting many stacks of Temporal Blasts, maximizing your damage, and also still being a very good AoE ad clear bow, which is exactly what Pre-Astyanax originally was. Fellas, I know this was a very long-winded review. I definitely didn't mean for this review to get this in depth, but we had to talk about it. There's so much here to this bow, and originally when I got this tier 5 elemental honing Incandescent roll, I didn't think much about it. I had no idea that this was in fact the god roll for this bow. And whether you use Pre-Astyanax with Oathkeepers or any other exotic that can scale your damage, whatever the case, this is a bow that will work wonders for you in all forms of content. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.